Today we're going to talk more about artificial intelligence. So in the first lesson, we discussed intelligence in humans and animals, because before we talk about artificial intelligence, we need to understand what we mean by intelligence. So 2 weeks ago, in the second lesson, we talked a little bit about consciousness, also a difficult concept, hard to define. And we looked at the essay on human intelligence. And there were a lot of interesting ideas there, maybe some controversial ideas. And right at the end of the lesson, I told you that actually this essay was written by a piece of artificial intelligence. So I think it's interesting how we could all be fooled, or we could all believe that such a complex essay was written by a machine. So I will just share my screen. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit about who wrote the essay. So we thought it might be an academic person, or maybe a student with some big ideals about humanity. In fact, it was this artificial intelligence program called GPT-3. If you want to read a little bit more, there's an article you can look at later. So GPT-3 is a kind of artificial intelligence, but it's to do with language. So it takes a lot of input from the internet, or input you want to give it, and it can be used to answer questions. It can write essays, can translate languages. It's very good at mimicking or copying people. So you can ask it to pretend to be Shakespeare, for example, and it will speak to you using that kind of language. It's very clever. And GPT-3 was developed by a business called OpenAI, which was founded by Elon Musk, so the billionaire that owns Tesla. And it's considered to be a very, very big advance in language-based artificial intelligence. And if we think a little bit about the future, thinking about some things we've seen in science fiction, so Brian always mentioned Data from Star Trek. This kind of very sophisticated AI is maybe something we would need to develop those kind of robot artificial intelligence of the future. So what I want to ask you to start the discussion today. So we had a lot of opinions about the essay. Some things I think you found good, some things maybe you did not agree with, but how do you feel about the essay now that you know it was written not by a person, but by an artificial intelligence? Brian, what do you think?
Shock. Fear. Yeah. I have heard about a theory about robot or any dolls made by human beings. When the doll or the robot became more like human beings, we would like it. But when the likeness reach some degree, human beings would react. Just it called a fear valley. When it reached the top, we found that the robot like human beings, we would fear. The likeness would drop down like a cliff, and we would adopt some action to stop it. Just like this, everyone know about it is written by an AI. The first action is shock.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that we want to develop this kind of AI because it can help us to do things. But as you said, when it becomes very close to being human, maybe we start to have a bad feeling about it. It's too much like being a human. I think it's interesting if thinking about if it's possible in the future that an AI can really mimic a human. We will also look at that later. So we have something called the Turing test that Alan Turing designed, which is a test where a machine pretends to be a human. So I think it's a very interesting topic, how close these machines are becoming human. Peggy, so I don't think you were here last week, but did you have a chance to look at the essay? What do you?
Okay. Firstly, I feel really shocked too because I thought that the essay may be written by a person, but because I seldom maybe read an exam that about maybe machine or artificial intelligence, so I thought that it is really cool because before that I would thought that the machine only help people maybe life more convenient or something, but the essay taught me that it could write and it could emanate like a person what we thought or what we want to organize in the maybe topic or maybe in the essay. I thought that this is really shocked to me. Yes.
Yeah, I think maybe we've seen in our everyday lives this kind of AI. For example, if you order something from Amazon or an online shopping place, sometimes when you have a problem, they have this chatbot. So it feels like you're talking to a person and you can type it things and it can answer, but you're talking to an AI. But as you say, we are maybe not used to seeing this kind of AI writing essays. And I think what's interesting is that as people, when we write, we use opinions that we have formed over our lifetime. We are maybe influenced by our society, our politics, and very much by emotions. And I think it's interesting to ask this kind of AI its opinion, which it is forming from many different types of information on the internet. And maybe it can challenge us a little bit to think about things differently because it is not writing with any kind of emotion because it's an AI. So could be interesting in the future. Maybe in universities, in schools, we can start to interact with this kind of AI. Yeah. Do we have any other students? Did anyone else join? Because I can't see all of you.
No.
No. Okay. So Peggy, do you see any danger or problems with this kind of technology in the future?
Um, um, I'm not really sure because I felt that maybe artificial intelligence right by someone maybe I don't know put something into the machine and maybe it will do some reaction about that. So maybe if you want it to write maybe easy that is not any danger in that, but if you want to make this technology into the other things, maybe because I read some essay that in Google Classroom, I thought that maybe if you use this kind of technology in war or in something dangerous, that will be dangerous to this or something like that. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. We will look at that later in the lesson, especially about the use of AI for war. So we have AI drones, and this is a very complicated topic, and a lot of people have different opinions about whether we should use AI in warfare. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that we will come and look at later when we talk a bit more about the ethics of using AI. Brian, what do you think? Do you see any other danger or problems with AI?
I think the AI is a powerful tool, but it is different from before human beings got powerful tool, just like nuclear bombs. Because, as Peggy said, if it is danger, it will by how we use it. Human beings control the power, but is AI is controlled by human beings? Yeah, that's a question. Just as we discussed, uh, consciousness. Did AI have conscious? Yeah. When I consider is, um, if the article, the essay is written by an AI, so it looks like an function or a process exists in a computer. So is it exist in computer anytime, anywhere? It controlled by human beings, or it could online anytime, not just like a conscious life and without endless lifetime. It is superior to human beings because human beings have lifetime, but AI didn't have lifetime. So I think I saw the danger of AI.
Yeah, it's also a good point. I think in the past, AI, it has certain inputs and the output is as good as the input. So, like you say, AI is controlled by humans. But I think now that will start to change because we have machine learning. So we have developed AI that continues to learn by itself with no input from humans. And in this way, I wonder, can we say that eventually in the future, machines might have a kind of consciousness? Are they able then to think for themselves? And we will also look at this in the next lesson, really the ethics of that. So do we need to make some laws that AI has to follow. Like we as humans have some laws, or we have some morals or some ethics in the society we have to follow. Or should we make the rules for the humans, how they should use AI and what they should use it for? And I think this is becoming a very big discussion as machines get more sophisticated and we can use them for more applications. Yeah. So Brian, do you think in the future AI will be able to completely mimic or copy human beings?
I think it depends on how human beings would give AI the space to grow up, you know. I think I would consider what is the purpose of human beings to create AI. As now, I think we will agree that it will help human to live better. On the other words, we think AI is our slaves. One day, if it cross the fence, maybe a human being would not allow it to grow more. So I think it is what we would consider is, can we accept and human created human beings?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there are lots of films, movies, science fiction movies where we have AI. So many films about robots in the very distant future. And as you said, we often portray or show AI and robots as being human slaves. So I think we are comfortable with the idea that they work for us and they have a certain amount of rules and we control them. But as you said, if we start to reach a point where machines have some kind of consciousness and they can really mimic humans and think for themselves, maybe those machines do not want to live like that. And then we have many complicated questions about how do we want to live with AI together in our society? Should AI have rights in the same way that humans have rights? I think this will be a very big topic in the future. Peggy, what do you think? Do you think that AI in the future will be able to mimic humans? And do you think we will have some problems at that time?
I watched a video that in the Google Classroom, same as, yeah. And I saw the video that the AI, maybe a robot, could working just like a human, because yeah, it work by a human beings, and it mimic people what and how they could work. So I think recently the AI could mimic people just as some move or just as some action. But if we want to make that AI to have the consciousness or emotion just like people, I think that would be the very long time in the future. Yeah, so just action now. Yeah, I thought that AI could successfully mimic human beings.
Yeah, that's true. I think we have already reached the point where AI can mimic humans physically. There are some very sophisticated kind of robots that even the face looks human. And you mentioned the video in the Google Classroom. So this is an AI from Boston Dynamics. This video they took of the robot running like a person in the forest. It really frightened a lot of people because people could start to see the military applications for warfare with this kind of AI. It kind of looks like a person running. What would happen if we give it a gun? I think we've reached that point where we start to become frightened because the machines look like we do. But as you said, one thing is the physical appearance, but this idea of consciousness, having a human mind, is something I think still very far in the future. But maybe we need to think about it now while it's still being developed, so that we have time to really decide how we want to live with this technology. Yeah. So I want to come back later to this discussion about ethics in AI. And we've already talked a little bit about warfare, some problems with mimicking humans, if maybe AI would be our slaves. But first, I want to look a little bit about the technology itself. So we've talked a lot about intelligence and the mind and a bit about machine learning, but I thought it would be interesting to look a bit at the history, so we can understand how do we use AI now, how did we use it in the past, and how could we use it in the future? And then I think we can come back and think a bit more about different kinds of uses or applications and what we think about that. So the origins of AI. We think of AI as being something quite recent. So maybe we think it's been developed for 30 years, something like this. But actually, when you look, AI as a concept really started many hundreds or even thousands of years ago. So the ancient Greeks, if you look at some of their literature or books, they actually talk about robots. They invented this kind of mechanism here to read the time based on the sun. So they already, thousands of years ago, had this idea of developing some kind of human-like machines. The Chinese, for example, created these automatons. So an automaton is like you see here, looks like a small person. It's mechanical, and it can do some actions a little bit like people. So I think at the time, many hundreds of years ago, this was quite shocking to see. So the first ideas of robots. This machine on the left-hand side is something from Europe a few centuries ago. It was the fashion to have these automaton machines on the dinner table, in fact. So rich people that had a banquet, so a big dinner or a feast, they would show off their sophistication with their automaton machine. Officially, artificial intelligence as a term was coined or was made in 1956. There was a conference in New Hampshire in the USA, and that was the first time somebody recorded this use of artificial intelligence. So they started to really develop AI as we know it now in the 1970s, but the funding or the money for this development was reduced in the 70s and 80s. So in the 70s and 80s, we called it the AI winter. So there were not so many developments because there wasn't so much money. In the 1980s, the field was revived, as I've said here. So revived, like brought back to life. So if someone dies, then they're revived back to life. The same with AI development. It was actually revised by the British because we wanted to compete with the Japanese. So you could say maybe with a bad intention or thought, but it had a positive outcome of this development of technology. So I just want to look at some key moments in the history of AI. There are hundreds of developments, a lot of technology, but it's interesting to see the main ones. So in fact, in 1939, there was the World's Fair, and they introduced this strange-looking electro robot, and it actually had some LPs, so some old records, and they used the records to make it speak. So it was one of the first concepts of a talking robot. There's a very famous science fiction author, Isaac Asimov, and he wrote a lot of books about robotics. There's also the film I, Robot, based on his books. And he made, in 1942, he wrote 3 laws. So if we gave some rules to robots, this is how they should behave. And we will come back and look at that in the next lesson. 1961, so GM in America developed Unimate. So it was the first robot used in car manufacturing. So already in the 1960s. 1965 was the first chatbot. So we know chatbots today, as I said, for maybe Amazon, online shopping. But in 1965, there was already this kind of text-based robot that you could talk to. 1972, something called Luna was sent to the moon and allowed geologists to do a lot of data analysis. So maybe the start of what we call today big data. 1979, so Stanford University in America, they created this thing which looks like a kind of trolley or cart. And if you put something in its way, an obstacle, it could navigate around it. So if you put a chair, it could use some artificial intelligence to move by itself. So jumping now to the 90s, as we said, there was not a lot of funding in the 70s and 80s for AI. But what came out of this competition of the British, the Japanese, and then funding and development in America, in 1995, America developed the MQ-1 Predator, which is the drone that you see here. And Peggy, you mentioned drones, and this is a very big topic. So when this drone was made, it was only for surveillance. So it's called aerial reconnaissance. So aerial in the sky, reconnaissance, so looking and finding information. Later, they realized, of course, you can attach rockets or guns to this kind of drone. So this drone has been used in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. It was used in the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia in the 90s. Many different applications of warfare. And this is a very big topic. People cannot agree whether we should use these kind of automated machines to kill people. Maybe it gives a bit of a disconnect between the person telling the machine what to do and the machine actually doing this thing. But we will also come back to this ethical topic. 1997, I guess a lot of people know IBM's Deep Blue. So it managed to beat one of the great chess grandmasters. It was previously thought that chess was so complex and needed still some kind of very human ability of logic, deduction. They thought a machine could still never beat a computer, but in fact, now machines can very easily beat even the best chess grandmasters. 1999, something a bit more cute. Sony introduced this robot dog. At the time, it cost $2,000. It's a lot of money now. It was a lot more money in 1999. It was supposed to be a kind of pet that could learn by interacting with the environment. So a very, very expensive toy. I think everybody has probably seen Asimo, developed by Honda in Japan. So it doesn't really look like a human, but the movements were very human-like. It's able to do backflips. It can perform tricks. So I think this is the start of very human-like AI development. Coming to now, the 21st century. We start to use AI a lot in our homes. 2002, we started to introduce robot vacuum cleaners. I have one of these actually, this Roomba, very useful. It can analyze your house, and we can be very lazy and let machines do our cleaning for us. So for me, has been a very nice development. 2004, the Opportunity and Spirit rovers, so these small robot vehicles, landed on Mars, and they perform experiments there and they analyze data using artificial intelligence. 2005, there's a racing challenge, and again, Stanford University, who does a lot of AI development, they made this car that could drive 175 miles with no driver. So that's quite impressive. 2011, Apple launched Siri. So already 10 years ago, we had this quite sophisticated chatbot or text-based AI. Interestingly, Peggy, you mentioned the Boston Dynamics video. This video, I think, was first released in 2015, and it frightened Bill Gates so much that he joined together with Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, and also Stephen Hawking, so the quantum physicist, and they already expressed or wanted to tell people that they had a big fear or they saw a lot of problems with this technology. So I think it's interesting to see that people like Bill Gates, so billionaires that can profit from this technology, publicly spoke about their worries about what we use this technology for. So even our big leaders in these industries are a little bit concerned what we do with this. So Peggy and Brian, can you think of any other AI that you use in your daily life, or that you see, or something we haven't talked about here? Peggy, how about you?
In my daily life, I would know that I usually use Siri. Yes, because just like yeah, maybe like a cleaning robot. I thought that Siri makes me life more convenient, because I could sometimes, when I was lazy, and I could maybe set an alarm by Siri or find something information by Siri. So I usually use that AI function. Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do, yeah. So I think there are many things like Siri that try to make our life easier.
Yes.
Sometimes Siri does not make our life easier, and it talks when we don't want it to. Well, that's the wrong thing, but yeah, I think it's a big change in the daily life. Yeah. Brian, how about you? Do you use any AI applications in your daily life?
I have noticed that in education market, there are some new product to help students to focus in classroom. It's just like a device to wear on your head, or some device just like camera to record students' eye focus. So help teacher to analyze whether the student is learning, is focused. I very appreciate that product would apply in class. That would help teachers a lot. And on the other hand, my house has a那个 Roomba to help me to to clean my house. That's useful.
Yeah, Roomba is great. Yeah, that's interesting about the use in education. Yeah, I didn't think about any applications for teaching, but I have not heard about this head technology you mentioned. But yeah, I think that will be an interesting development for the classroom. But do you think students, they like to use this technology, or do you think maybe it gives them some pressure?
Yeah, that will based on how teacher to use it. I don't agree to use this device to value how the people, or to score them. It would be better to help a student to focus on, or even myself. If if I could use it to help me to learn something, I would be better. I would like to do that. Just like I'm looking for some app to help students to correct their pronouns, because that's difficult work, especially for someone like me, not non-native speakers. And the student would be shy to interact with real people. So if they could interact with a robot or an app, that would be more like to do that practice?
Yeah, I think there are many applications in language learning, and we already use a lot of them. So Google Translate, for example, it uses machine learning, so it gets better with more input. But as you said, I think there are many applications for analyzing the way we speak, helping people with their pronunciation. So maybe none of us will have jobs in the future because everybody will be taught by AI. I hope not, but maybe we can work together with the AI. Yeah.
Yeah, just like a teacher would be replaced by AI.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's something people also have a lot of fear about, not just for teaching, but people are afraid that if AI can do jobs better than humans, then what will we do in the future? We will become, we call it redundant. So redundant with no purpose. Well, let's see.
But as a teacher, I would like this technology improve my work because we will redefine what a teacher would do because we must to do high level work, and AI just like an assistant to help us.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So there are a lot of tasks which maybe we don't need a person to do, a teacher, that an AI could help with, but there are still these more high level tasks, or maybe when we're helping students understand very complicated essays and things where we need to think about emotions, this kind of assistant maybe cannot help us. So if we think in the classroom, looking at a poem or something written by Shakespeare, we react to it with our emotions, and even the most sophisticated AI, it's not able to do that now. So yeah, I think maybe we could have a classroom where the AI assists us, but it doesn't replace us. Well, let's see. Peggy, what do you think about this?
Sorry to interrupt you. Angeline is with us, so you may ask her.
Thank you.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see. I can only see the person speaking. So, hi, Angeline.
Hi. I
What do
personally I use Roomba. I like Roomba. I love Roomba.
it's great.
And I use AI to turn on my air condition before I go home. Before I arrive home.
Okay.
And then speaking about teaching, I like AI because when I ask my student to record their performance, they use AI to change the tone quality and make the performance sound greater, sound nicer. When we were on the pandemic period, we cannot go to school to present classes. So I've asked them to record the performance. So they cheat it. That's what AI can help students. But when we think retrograde, when we think backward, if we go retrograde, I think back to 17th or 18th century, life was very simple, very easy, very boring to the modern kids, modern youth. But for the youth, if they want to if they want to perform 17th, 18th, or even 19th century art, they need to work on it without AI's assistance, I believe. Because AI cannot reproduce our emotion and our feeling to the art. That's my point of view.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to discuss music and musical applications. because as you said, perhaps AI could perfectly perform a piece of music, but it lacks that emotion that a human being could bring to it. So I'm not an expert at all in music, but I've understood that, you know, if you listen to a classical pianist, you think that they all perform the same piece of music in the same way because you have a set of notes and they're playing the same notes. But I understand that different performers, they give a different quality or feel to the piece based on their interpretation, right? And that's maybe something that AI can't do. Yeah. So I think it will be interesting to see in the future, how do we just keep using AI as a tool or an aid, and how much do we do that? There's also a big discussion about live performance these days. So most singers, we think they sing live, but they don't really sing live because the signal is modulated, and this is also a kind of AI. It's feeding back in a loop and it's making the person singing sound better. There's a big discussion there. Do we really want to do that so that everybody sounds perfect pitch? Or do we really want to hear that raw emotion and accept maybe the imperfections singers make? So I think there's already a debate about music. Yeah, it's a nice topic. So just to finish off today, what about the future of AI? AI really helped actually during the pandemic in the vaccine development. So obviously the vaccine had to be developed very quickly, and we've never developed a vaccine this quickly in the past. And we were able to do it thanks to AI models. So there was a huge amount of data from the research, and thanks to AI, we were able to analyze that and develop a vaccine much more quickly. So quite a positive use of AI. We're already talking about developing cars to be fully automated. So modern cars now that we drive, they sometimes feel like machines that drive themselves. We have so many systems built in that can detect accidents before they happen. They can take control of your steering wheel. But in the future, there's also talk about these robo-taxis. And I think the picture here is something developed in China, if I'm not wrong, which is this kind of robo-taxi, which for me is a bit frightening, to be locked in a car that's driving itself, but maybe it's more reliable than humans. I don't know. So we talked about language processing. So as Brian said, maybe it could help us in the classroom. Quantum computing. So this crazy looking machine on the top left here is a quantum computer. So ordinary binary based computers, they are only so powerful, and quantum computers, the power is unlimited. So they use quantum waves and in a certain space, and then they can analyze those waves. They've used quantum computers to develop batteries for cars, to do a lot of different big data analysis. And this, I think, will really be one of the big future applications of AI. That goes together with AI chips. So obviously we use chips in all kinds of technology, but if we combine these chips with this kind of machine learning and AI and this kind of intelligence, we have more sophisticated chips that can maybe run more sophisticated computers, mobile phones, many applications. And as I mentioned, we have machine learning. So machines continuously improve what they are able to do. We use this all the time now to look at sales data, fraud detection. So banks use it. So there are many, many millions of bank transactions on credit card every day. And we use machine learning to analyze this and to see if there's a certain pattern in these transactions. It's used very much for product recommendations, maybe a slightly negative aspect for the consumer. So AI is used to look at everything you look at on the internet, when you use Google, when you use Facebook, social media, and sometimes you open something and you see an advert for something you looked at on a different computer. Or maybe you talk to Siri about something and it advertises you that thing on your television. I personally don't like it. I think a lot of people don't. And this is another ethical debate. How do we use this data? So just to finish off, because we just have a few minutes, Angeline, do you see any other future applications, either now or in 100 years of AI that we haven't talked about yet?
No, not now.
No. Do you think maybe in 50 years the world will look completely different to how it does now? Or do you think we've reached the point where the development starts to get slower?
I think within 50 years, people will rely on AI much more than we are now. So human must learn how to be stronger than AI.
Yeah. And then I think we really need to think what we let AI do. Yeah.
And we need to be stronger, but not smarter. I don't think we can be smarter than them, but we need to be stronger and not to be fear of them.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, as I said, some of it is already a little bit frightening. And I think we also have a lot of films where we see very bad applications of AI, and this frightens us even more. We look at science fiction. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Peggy, what do you think? Do you see any other uses of AI in the future?
Maybe I'm not sure, but if we are just like what we talked about in the beginning, that maybe our learning skills could use with AI. When we are reading or we are preparing something like in the books, and maybe we saw an apple and the AI could help us to maybe connect with fruit, connect with red, just like a color or something like that. Yes, maybe in the future we could connect by AI, not use our brain or use just maybe use our books. I don't know. But I think that would be more easier to read or to realize something. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we use AI to develop ourselves as humans. Yeah, that's interesting actually, because here we are talking about things very separate from humans, machines, kind of classroom assistants, chatbots, but maybe somehow we will develop ourselves and together with AI. And yeah, very interesting, I think. I think that also might frighten some people. They might feel like we will turn into a kind of robot in the future. Let's see. So to finish off, Brian, what do you think? Do you see any other applications outside the classroom?
I think in the future of AI, the PPT showed that it would refer to the application and the outside world of human being and the AI. But I think as it said that where the fear from about the AI, that would become from what is human beings and what is AI. Three basic question is what is human beings are, who we are, and where are we from, and where will we go is very basic three questions about human beings. And today, this is the first time human beings would play God to create an artificial intelligence. That would be a chance to understand or to find out the answer of the three basic questions. One day one day we figure out what is AIR, and maybe this is the day we figure out what is human beings are.
Yeah, I think you mentioned an interesting phrase, play God. So I think this is like humans given the chance to play God, to create human-like things, and we have to decide what rules we use. There's many ethical discussions. So I think that's a really nice point to finish with. So next time, I would like to really look at the ethics of AI. So we've seen the technology. We've thought about human intelligence. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by consciousness? And so finally, I want to look at what rules might we need for AI and how does this fit in society? So I will upload something into the Google Classroom, but a little bit of homework. I would like you to think about if we have to make some ethical rules that we give to an AI, what rules would you give it? Or should we give rules to the humans controlling AI? So I will upload the questions in the Google Classroom, but just have a think about the ethics and how we could use AI in society.
Before we end this class, I have a question for Brian. Yeah, because I heard something going on, and I wonder if did the AI do the talking for you tonight, Brian? Yeah.
It's a Turing test tonight.
Yeah, maybe Brian doesn't know how to speak English, but then he connect himself with some AI, and then he blah 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 blah.
Yeah, my Siri response is again. Do you hear my Siri talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's where my suspicion came from. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's
Next week we will look at the Turing test. So maybe we can have Brian do the Turing test, and then we can be sure if Brian is a real person.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much for this great class. See you next week.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.